Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. A tear for Mr. Pesbody. Evelyn was a woman in her mid-30s who seemed to have it all. A successful career and a beautiful home. But despite her outward appearance of happiness and contentment, Evelyn was constantly battling demons within herself. From a young age, Evelyn had always been a perfectionist. She excelled in school, graduated top of her class, and landed a high-paying job at a prestigious law firm. But as the years went by, the pressure to maintain her flawless image became overwhelming. She was constantly striving for perfection in every aspect of her life, fearing that any sign of weakness or failure would shatter the facade she had built. One fateful day, in a moment of sheer desperation, Evelyn fled her office and drove aimlessly. The long highway stretched out before her. Evelyn's journey was not without its challenges. The rhythmic hum of the engine and the gentle whir of the tires on the asphalt were the only sounds that accompanied her. She found herself contemplating the choices that had led her to this point. As she drove down the long highway, occasionally she would drift over her lane, and she would hear the honking of a car horn. She would be lost in thought and not paying attention to the road, which is something she never done before. Evelyn was a very good driver. She did not know what was going on. I need to stop this and get my mine back on the road before I kill myself of someone else. Her headlights illuminated the highway, casting long shadows across the landscape. She had been driving all day and well into the night. Her eyes were heavy and burning from the headlights blaring in her eyes. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white as she navigated the road ahead. The miles seemed to stretch on endlessly, the road disappearing into the darkness ahead. But she wasn't afraid. She knew she needed to stop soon. The sign up ahead read, "Exit 1 mile." As she exited the highway, she felt a sense of dread. It was not a well-lit road. See let out a sigh of relief as she seen a Waffle House sign lit up. But to get to the Waffle House parking lot, she had to go through an old, abandoned gas station. As she cut through the station, she could see a shadowing figure standing on the corner of the abandoned station. She couldn't take her eyes off the figure. It was as if he was staring right through her, As she pulled into the Waffle House parking lot, she bumped into the curb, which broke her fixation of the figure at the gas station. She exited the car and went inside. It was a drab-looking place. As she looked around, the waitress said she could sit anywhere. Evelyn took a seat near the waitress station. She felt safer there. For some reason, couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Evelyn tried to rationalize her fears, telling herself that it was just irrational paranoia or stress getting the best of her. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Evelyn said she would like a cup of coffee. As the waitress was pouring her coffee, curiosity got the best of her, and she couldn't resist asking the waitress about the man. "Who is that man standing over there?" Evelyn inquired, nodding towards the figure outside. The waitress paused for a moment, glancing out the window before turning back to Evelyn with a puzzled expression. "I don't see anyone, dear. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" she replied, furrowing her brow in confusion. Evelyn sat there quietly, drinking her coffee. Evelyn must have fallen asleep. She felt a gentle shaken on her shoulder. She smiled at the waitress, then got up, paid for her coffee, then went to the restroom. She splashed cold water on her face. As she was leaving, Evelyn thanked the waitress and headed to her car, dreading the drive ahead. She was tired. The tiredness in her bones weighed her down, making the thought of sitting behind the wheel seem like a daunting task. As she was getting in the car, Evelyn looked over at the station. She could see the man starting her way. Panic took over, and she hit the gas, sending gravel spraying, ricocheting off the underneath of her car. She flew through the parking lot. The adrenaline pumped through her veins. The stop sign loomed ahead, but she had no intention of slowing down. With a defiant attitude, she pressed down on the gas pedal even harder, the tires squealing in protest as she hit the pavement. As she got onto the interstate with fear in her eyes, Evelyn keeps looking in her rearview mirror as if the shadowing figure was about to bite her on the behind. Evelyn hadn't noticed that she was going well over 80, her eyes fixated on the rear view. But when she finally got the strength to take her eyes off the rear view, to look at the road ahead, there in front of her was a semi stalled in her lane. With no time to react, Evelyn let out a horrifying, blood-curdling scream. Evelyn's eyes opened, and she jotted up, unaware of where she was. The room was spinning around, and her head hurt. Her boss, Mr. Peabody, was knelling next to her. "No, don't move." He was telling her to take it easy, that she had a bad fall and hit her head, and the ambulance was on the way. All of a sudden, Evelyn grabbed his coat with both hands and blurted out, "It was all a dream." Then her eyes slowly closed, and her grip loosened. She became limp. Mr. Peabody carefully lowered her down. The ambulance hadn't made it in time. She was gone. With tears streaming down his face, he bent down and gave her a kiss on her forehead. Then he pulled the blanket up over her head. As he sat there with his heart breaking, regretting that he never told her that he loved her. The hunt never ends. You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? The note read. The man had shivered when he had read those ominous words, as perspiration began to drip down from his temple, the salty liquid seeping into his eyes and temporarily blinding him. This is the end, the man had said to himself in an agitated, trembling whisper as he looked down at the sheet of notepaper which had been left on his office desk. He glanced around at the other employees to see if anyone was looking his way, giving him some indication on who had left the message. But all of them were engaged in their own little world of toting up the facts and figures which were constantly coming through on their computer terminals. What had caused this man to turn deathly white and feel so nauseous? How had those 9 little words on the page that had now turned his world completely upside down come to cause him so much anguish and despair? That unhappy event had happened a week before. So let us now find out what had caused this man, Henry Miller, to end up in this now distressing location where he now found himself. At this moment, he was looking between the slats of a Venetian blind, observing the street outside, and trying as best as he could to remain unseen from the road in front of the building, where he now cringed, frightened out of his wits. How had it come to this, he thought. Last week, he didn't have a care in the world. All was going well at work. And then came that note, and he found himself involved in something that had instantly changed his life, and now he was on the run, constantly looking over his shoulder, and at this moment hiding in this abandoned building, a structure that had a large sign outside stating that it was condemned and would shortly be torn down. So, how long could he remain here before he had to find another place of sanctuary? The year is 1948. The war is over. After 6 years of bloodshed and butchery by a psychopath and his evil, willing collaborators, during which an estimated 80 to 100 million people had died or been murdered. The Nuremberg trials had finished, and many, many hundreds of German Nazi war criminals had found justice on the end of a rope for crimes against humanity. Then, there were some who had decided that a cyanide pill was a much quicker way to escape the noose of retribution. Others, seeing that the end was near, had made their getaway before the Russians entered Berlin and tortured them, finding their way to South America, where many of them lived for a while. trying to evade the men from the Simon Wiesenthal organization. People dedicated to finding every last Nazi and bringing them to justice, headed by their leader, a man known as the Nazi Hunter, who was a Holocaust survivor. Even though many years have passed, the hunt still goes on, still finding those vile and depraved monsters, a subspecies of the human race. Although some are well into their dotage, justice is still being served. A particular case in point is the case of Adolf Eichmann, who, along with Heinrich Himmler, was the architect of the final solution, where 6 million Jews were sent to the death camps, only to be gassed, their bodies cremated, and the remains crushed. Eichmann was finally located in Argentina in 1961, thinking that after 16 years he was safe. But justice caught up with him, and he met the Grim Reaper on the end of a rope a year later. But returning to Henry Miller, a man who had changed his name from Henrik Mengele, and who had managed to escape from his home in Germany to live in Spain, a neutral country during the war, just after the conflict had begun. The surname he was born with, Mengele, was the same name as the man who was once revered by the Nazi Party for his inhumane and horrific experiments on unwilling participants. The infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, a man given the name of the Angel of Death, a man, if indeed he could even be called that, who performed appalling and unspeakable experimentation on live inmates of the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Most of those subjects dying a lingering, painful, and agonizing death, all in the cause of making the so-called German master race into a nation of blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan supermen. But what had caused Henry to be reduced to his present situation? It was all due to that one large letter that he had found on his desk just over a week before, which caused him a great deal of torment. He had read the words, his trembling hands trying to stop the shaking that was coursing through his body. The words that read, "You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" For many years, he had feared that maybe someone, somewhere, at some time, might find out about his namesake and make his life a living hell, maybe even murder him, with the idea that he was in some way engaged in the work carried out by that misguided and psychotic mass murderer, and had somehow missed out on receiving the same fate that had befallen the other members of the Nazi death squads. But he had been so careful and had never told anyone of his former name or his possible relationship to the Angel of Death at Auschwitz. So, how could someone have found out where he lived or worked? The only way out that he could think of was to go on the run, getting well away from anyone he had worked with and from where he had lived. He had no plan, just a crazed idea that he must stay out of sight in this empty building before he made his next move, all sorts of wild ideas coursing through his brain. Thoughts that he had never even dreamt about, up until now, came into his mind. It was a few weeks later in the office where Henry had formerly been employed, a place from which he had mysteriously disappeared sometime previously, without explanation. One of the other employees who had worked with him had just read an article in the newspaper that had shocked him. It mentioned that his former workmate had been found dead in an abandoned building, having seemingly committed suicide by ingesting a cyanide pill. As tears welled up in his eyes, he murmured words that he found extremely difficult to say. "Henry, what happened? Why did you do it? Just as your friends here were organizing a surprise party for your birthday. We tried so hard to keep it a secret, and you thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? Unexpected turbulence." I catch myself staring into the bright blue space of nothingness as I instinctively prepare another cup of tea. Balancing myself with a wide stance, the tea swoops up around the cup, teasing a spill, as I manage to place it down for the woman in 12D. Her legs stretch out in front of her as she makes the most of the emergency exit row. I move down the next few rows, filling plastic cups with water and steamed coffee. My mind is once again invaded with their final words to me. "You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress. What are you doing tonight, Soph?" Krista asks, rearranging her white blouse and smoothing down her skirt as I start packing down the drinks cart. "Just the usual, I guess." "Wow, look at you spicing things up," she mocks, adjusting the pink scarf around her neck with perfectly manicured hands. The usual means I will be performing the same overnight trip routine of gym, jog around the city, order in cheap hotel food, and read a book. I once defied my better judgment and went out with Krista, but ended up having a panic attack in the bathroom. One of the guys at the bar had slipped an arm around my waist, and the touch of a stranger set off every warning sign in my body. I opted to get the next round of margaritas after pulling myself together, and my head didn't hit the hotel pillow until 3 a.m. before my alarm woke me up an hour later. The sunlight at this altitude is unforgiving on hungover eyes. "So who are you planning on staying up with all night?" I tease. "Okay, so you remember how I told you about Matt?" I hardly remember any of her friends' names, but I nod anyway. "So he's in town and has invited over a couple of his friends from work. We are going to start at Gin Palace. You remember that cute place, right? Hidden door in the alleyway, a few lanes down from the hotel. Bookcases on the wall, house music, and those huge wine glasses I like, but with all different types of fancy gin and tonics." With my back to her, as I stow away the trolley, I realize she's waiting for my confirmation. "Oh yeah, I remember. Nice place." Unbothered by my obvious lack of interest, she continues. "Anyway, we are starting there, and then we're trying a new spot nearby. Apparently, one of his friends knows a club that is all completely glow in the dark. And she's cut off by the sound of the seatbelt light turning on. As the captain announces, we are likely to experience turbulence. Our cabin manager signals us to make our way down the aisle to ensure everyone follows the instructions, stopping to help a mother of two buckle up her sticky-looking toddlers. I think about Krista and how she is so open to new experiences and people. I can already imagine how her night is going to go. She will greet her friends with a big smile, and they'll cheers to having a fun night ahead. They'll share laughs, gossip, travel experiences, and talk like they've known each other for years. She has that effect on people, myself included. A commotion seems to be happening down the back of the plane, but it doesn't sound unusual. It's probably another disgruntled passenger complaining about being restrained by the seatbelt sign. Sounds like another safety rebellion happening. I joke quietly as I meet Krista in the center of the cabin. Actually, it's some fancy businessman with an accent complaining he was assigned the wrong seat. She rolls her eyes. I think he's European, but not the sexy, swoony kind. My stomach drops from the mention of an accented businessman. I swallow the wave of anxiety and force a sarcastic smile. If only more swoony European tourists came here for holidays, hey? Well, I wouldn't be hanging out with Matt and his friends tonight. I'll tell you that. She quips. We're about 30 minutes from touchdown and about to prepare the cabin for landing. It has been a relatively easy flight. Everyone in my section seems content, and the disgruntled man appears to have quietened down. Our cabin manager approaches Krista and I. She asks us to continue scanning the rows further down while she checks in with the captain. The turbulence is almost unnoticeable as I walk toward the back of the plane, but I sense a few nervous flyers and reassure them it's okay. We're not far from our destination. Then I see him sitting in the aisle seat, second row from the back. Cold gray eyes stare right through me. His mouth curls into a tight, malicious grin. A sudden drop of the aircraft challenges my balance, and I grab onto the nearest headrest to steady myself. Apologizing to no one in particular, I turn around in disbelief. Looking over my shoulder, I check if it's just a cruel trick of my subconscious. The seat is empty. Terror begins to smother my body, and I feel my hands tremble. His face has haunted me before. I've seen him in train stations, in busy restaurants, and on crowded flights like today. I'm almost used to his memory penetrating my reality. I remind myself again that it won't be real, and my mind is playing tricks. A few confused faces bring me back, and I straighten up before retreating to the front of the plane. Pulling the curtain across behind me, I start to feel my throat close up. It's not real. He's not here. I was just imagining it. My hand is gripping my chest, as if to stop my heart from bursting out of me. The lavatory door is open, then locked on the other side of the thin material, separating the passengers, oblivious to my silent distress, calming my breaths to a steadier rhythm. I squeeze my elbows onto the small bench space in front of me and let my head fall into my hands. I sense I am no longer alone. The uniform suits you. Now I'm hearing things. My insides turn, and I feel vomit fighting its way up. You don't have to be shy. I know it's been a while. His words are thick with Syra, and an accent I haven't heard in over a year. My nose twitches as his cologne inches closer, infiltrating my airways with unbearable familiarity. Definitely real. I've missed you, he says casually, as if we are two old friends. I desperately will for Krista, or another attendant to interrupt the reunion, but I remain compromised. He's dangerous. I know this. A plane full of bystanders and a small crew of staff. What is he willing to risk? Before I am able to answer my own thoughts, I feel a cool touch to my lower back, and I stiffen. The hairs on my neck snap out like razor blades, and my blood turns to ice. Why won't you look at me, my dear? As his hand slides further up my back, I'm screaming for help, but no sound is leaving my mouth. I'm launching my knee into his ribs, but my legs are stuck in place. I'm reaching for the intercom, but my hands are locked together on my chest. A jolt knocks us both off our balance, and I'm able to swing out of his touch, only to find us face to face. He's shorter than I remember. Silver flecks scatter the sides of his thinning hair. He's even uglier than I remember. Sir, you can't be back here. Krista drifts past the curtain and pauses in between us. Get back to your seat now, please. Of course, my dear. Pausing to smirk before he exits. Are you okay? You look like you've just seen a dead body. Krista's face is filled with concern. I bite my tongue before responding with, I wish I had, and let her know I'm fine, just a little shaken from the bumpy ride. Oh, really? I can hardly feel a thing. She moves over to the CID's system and sets the lavatory lights to red. We'll be descending soon. I straighten up my blouse and pat under my eyes to make sure any signs of horror are blurred into my smooth, professional mask. So did Mr. Fancy Pants think he'd find his seat up here? What? I can hardly hear her over the ringing in my eardrums. The European guy with the accent. Was he pestering you about his seat? Oh, I force an eye roll. He just came too far, up looking for the bathroom. Well, you'd think he's a regular flyer with that attitude. Wouldn't he know where the lavatories are on these planes by now? I shrug and move past her, pretending to be busy conducting final checks on the food and beverage lockers. Krista announces the instructions for our descent across the cabin intercom, then turns to me. I'm just going to do a final rubbish collection and seat check. You want to just wait here? You look a little pale. Yeah, if you don't mind. Thanks. I move to open up the jump seat and begin to strap myself in. Damn, I mutter, I forgot to pull back the curtain. My hands are still shaky from the monster behind it. I begin to release the seat belt and stand up, taking a deep breath in before I reach up for a handful of fabric. But a hand grabs mine first. My weight is suddenly whipped out from underneath me, and I'm falling. A wicked crack erupts from behind my ears. I can feel something warm and wet trickle down my back. You thought you could run away, and I would forget about you? He's hovering over me. Did anyone hear me fall? Bringing his slimy fingers to my face, he strokes my cheek. Paralyzed. I'm trying to run in a bad dream, but my legs won't move faster than a walk. I'm being chased, but my body has no sense of urgency. My mind is fighting to control a faulty vessel. His hand on my thigh makes me feel 18. Oh my God! I hear someone shriek. She fell. I was just checking on her. Sophie, are you okay? What happened? Krista bends down next to him, and I struggle to focus on which one of her swirling faces is real. I want to tell her to call for an emergency, but I can't seem to gather the words. She's an old friend. I can keep an eye on her if you get a first aid kit, he says, maintaining his cool composure next to me. Looking directly at him, she says, "Sir, you need to leave right now." Before she can say more, he thrusts his hand around her throat, and she is backed against the jump seat I was sitting on just a minute before. Awful screeches escape from her mouth as the veins grow by her temples. Her eyes search desperately. Watching my friend struggle for her life suddenly releases all the tightly wound ropes, holding me anchored to the floor. My hand reaches for the nearest cupboard, and a coffee pot extends from my arm and cracks down on his skull. I hit him again and again and again. "Soph," she croaks. "Sophie," Krista pleads, struggling to pull herself up from the ground. He is silent. Snapping back to my sense of self, I realize what I've done. The coffee pot drops from my hand, and a few wet drops slide off my face with it. "We need a doctor. Is anyone a doctor?" I yell, and hear the gasps echo down the aircraft. I was fresh out of high school and approaching my move-out date assigned by my parents when I started working. It was said to be the best restaurant in town. We had regular guests from all over the world who stayed in the hotel above. I didn't notice it at first, how I was always rostered on the section of mostly dinner for once. I received generous tips and learned about the different places they were all from. I enjoyed being praised for my efforts and attentiveness during the meal. The mostly male and outspoken staff generally left me alone, which suited me just fine. Though occasionally they'd comment on my appearance, telling me I needed more makeup if I had tired eyes, or to put on a smile when I was clearing tables. The manager would joke about my tight ass, and even grabbed it once to check the merchandise in front of the kitchen crew. Mr. Ackerman would arrive every night at 5 p.m. and order a glass of Syrah when he was in town. the staff about life in Europe and his work in the oil business. I caught his eyes scanning my movements a few times, but we didn't speak until I was placing the napkin at his table and asking, "The usual again, sir? Make sure you take good care of him." I was frequently reminded by my manager, Colin, at the mandatory Christmas work party. We had dinner at a local pub, and Colin insisted we joined him for drinks after. Once a girl refused these nights out drinking, and she shortly had her hours cut and tips reduced until she had no choice but to quit. At the bar, we ran into some of our regulars. Mr. Ackerman seemed pleased to see us and eyed my black dress thoroughly before delivering a sharp wink. "You should go chat with him. Keep up the good service, you know," my manager instructed with a pat on the ass, a glass of wine in hand. Courtesy of the man next to me, I sat there, struggling to answer the questions over the blasting music. I noticed how misplaced Mr. Ackerman was in his business casual attire, surrounded by partying patrons, 10 or 20 years his junior. "Sorry, I didn't hear you." I leaned into his side ever so slightly, struggling to keep any distance between us. His hand slid around my thigh in response. "I'll miss seeing you when I go back home." "I'm sure you'll be fine." There were flowers in my locker the following week, and a note saying he looked forward to seeing me again. I tried talking to Colin about how it made me uncomfortable and thought it was unprofessional. "Sophie, this is professional. You're making connections and bringing in regular money. Keep up the excellent work." He checked in a month later and greeted me with 3 kisses on the cheek during a busy service. I wanted to run. I wanted to wash his touch off in a scorching shower. Instead, I smiled and continued serving overpriced glasses of champagne. Then came dinner. Colin called me before my shift, asking me to wear the same black dress from the Christmas party. "It's a formal kind of occasion tonight. We need to be on an extra level." Too afraid to disobey, I reluctantly arrived with black kitten heels to match, only to find I was to be served that night instead of serving. Promised my pay as usual, plus a tip from the foreign businessman. I followed orders. He sat at the candlelit table and discussed his travels and work in the private dining room. I actively avoided any conversation directed back to me. A package with a silver bow was placed between us when the plates were cleared. "For you, my dear." I carefully unwrapped it to find an expensive-looking perfume. Only the best for my favorite girl. I don't know what to say. Forcing a smile, which ached my entire face. "Say nothing," he whispered, pulling my hand toward him before placing his lips on my skin. I resisted every urge to whip it away and smack his jaw, but I felt another pair of eyes on me. I glanced over to the room door to find my manager peering in, nodding in approval. Everyone knew. They all played a part in it. They helped print letters, deliver flowers, and even gave him my phone number. I was a pawn in their game. Mr. Ackerman must have offered more money than I could have imagined to the entire hotel staff. What other motive did they have? Or was it just a funny joke to them? What followed in the months after will stay with me for the rest of my life. I eventually cracked the morning after being requested to join Mr. Ackerman in his room for the night. I burst through the lobby and headed straight to the manager's office. I'd saved enough of my generous tips to book a flight to the other side of the world with an approved visa and an interview with an airline. I could finally escape. Colin laughed in disbelief of my resignation and career change. You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress. I dropped my apron on his desk and left without another word, going over the interaction in my head, making sure I didn't let it slip where the airline was based. The thud of the wheels touching down sends excruciating pain up my scalp as I continue applying pressure to my wound. Krista is sitting opposite me, with her face slowly returning to color, squeezing my hand. The emergency services are waiting at the gate, and I brace myself for the chaos about to erupt when we open the doors. I don't know what is going to happen. All I know is that my chest feels lighter, and I can breathe again. I spy with my little eye. It's funny, the things one thinks about when staring dramatically out the window. Even funnier, the things we do. I stopped racing raindrops a few miles back when I kept winning. My mother was right. Winning at everything gets unbelievably boring. Who knew a car window would teach me that lesson? Trailing my eyes lazily over the book on my lap, I deliberate. I could read, but that would mean turning on the overhead light, and I don't want what's out there to see me any better than it already does. Besides, reading in the back seat makes me nauseous. Sighing, I look out the window again. Dark skies press down on the trees, lining either side of the road, their jagged silhouettes barely visible beneath the moonlight. But I don't need to see them to know it is there. I can feel it, like the fabric of my clothes against my skin, like the weight of my own breath in my lungs. It's waiting, watching. It won't be able to follow us past the state line, not when it's tied by its grave, deep in the very forest it now lurks in. If we can just keep moving, if we don't stop, my fingers tighten around the seatbelt, because in the trunk, wrapped in tarps, are knives. The blood on them should be drying, crusting over. But that doesn't matter. It won't be the knives that get us caught. It'll be it. The road stretches endlessly. Twin lines of paint vanishing into the dark. The wipers squeak against the windshield, streaking rainwater instead of clearing it. The radio hums static beneath the commercials, like an unspoken warning. To whom, though? You see it? Bex asks beside me. Out of the four of us, she's freaking out the worst. I've long since put a barrier between our seats to avoid the worst of her rocking and jittery libs. I give her another flat look, hoping this one will shut her up for the rest of our trip. If I did, don't you think I would have said something by now? She whimpers and turns back to her own window, staring wide-eyed at the trees. I meet Rick's eyes in the rearview mirror, and Theo side-eyes me from the passenger seat. None of us say a word. In truth, I can see it. The shifting shadow that vaults across the street every few feet before melting into the trees. It got so out of hand. It was never. No, we did mean to do it. We just didn't think it'd come back to bite us like it did. Is doing. What's also true is that Bex will not be making it past the state limits with us. She can't be trusted. The minute everything was done and buried, she broke. Broken things aren't always fixable, and she is one loose end we cannot risk letting go, or it would. We were all screwed. Rick blinks twice. I inhale deeply, sighing quietly through my nose. This is part of the plan. It won't chase us past the state limits, because it can't. But it also will have no incentive to do so. It's why we let Bex do it in the first place. Theo hums and raises the volume on the radio. Commercials, figures. Rick blinks one more time. The locks click, lightning flashes, bleaching Bex's side of the car in stark white. She yelps, flinching away from the window. I take my chance, sliding closer and pulling her into an embrace. It'll be okay, I whisper into her hair. Bex clutches at me, desperate. I let her. Everyone deserves comfort in the end. I swallow down my goodbyes. Theo coughs. I kick at his seat. Shut it, my hit says. The timing needs to be right. A shift in the trees. Closer now. The weight of something pressing against the night. Watching. Expectant. Do you hear that? Bex whispers, voice barely there. Like scraping. I don't answer. Because she doesn't hear scraping. She hears breathing. Shh. Nothing's there. You are just hearing things. I finally say, petting her hair. She doesn't feel me slide her seatbelt off or reach for the door handle. The door pops open. Mila, she whispers. Wait. Her fingers dig into my collar. She feels it now. The open air behind her. Too late. I pry her hands off me, using the impulse to send her flying out of the car. Sorry. I squeeze her one last time to make the hard push on I give her. Bex screams. Her arms flail, desperate. For the door. For me. For anything. Her fingers catch on the seatbelt. All in vain. She tumbles, hitting the pavement in a mess of limbs. I should look away, but I don't. It roars. I turn just in time to see it pounce on the prone body on the road through the rear window. Rick finally breathes a sigh of relief, and seeing him do so, uncoils the tight knot of tension between my shoulders. Theo closes his eyes and smiles, whistling along with the song playing. The car feels bigger now, quieter. I roll my shoulders, adjusting to the absence. Something lingers in the air, something final, or perhaps something new. 4 down to 3, a new dynamic. Interesting. It's a shame, but change is necessary sometimes. And there is no better time than right now. Isn't that the saying? I unbuckle my seat belt and close the car door. Smooth. Careful. I lean between the front seats, smirking at Theo. He rolls his eyes, shaking his head fondly. I kiss Rick on the cheek, breathing in his cologne. He reaches up to stroke my cheek, takes his eyes off the road, long enough to kiss the corner of my mouth. Not a word, he murmurs, to our grave. I grin. It roars behind us. Bex doesn't. We cross the state limits. I sit back. The rain races down my window enthusiastically. Would you look at that? I win again. Just 2 more hours to get home. Late for rest. This story centers around death. I'm late, she thought, as she ran for the bus. Her friends would say that was her life's motto. Amelia scrambled on the bus, trying not to jostle anyone. She had been given a final warning about not getting to work on time, and knew her boss was serious. She was good at her job. But this city had over 2 million people. She could be replaced. In fact, she was one of many autopsy technicians who were employed at her job. She enjoyed working with her colleagues and liked working under her supervisor. The problem was, on top of being a natural procrastinator, she was in school full-time while working full-time. But this was her last semester. Her goal was to become an ME. She had always been interested in true crime as a kid and spent her free time watching the ID channel. Her first interest was in forensic science because she wanted to investigate crime scenes. But death and dead bodies never bothered her, and she started working in the morgue as an undergrad, which spurred her interest in forensic pathology. It was then that she learned she was gifted in reading corpses. All those years of hearing about petechiae, cyanosis, and lividity became useful. She could read bodies like a book. That, combined with her proclivity for stockpiling information about diseases and murder, made her a veritable glossary of forensic pathology. Amelia was well liked at work because she was knowledgeable and friendly. Plus, she had a great work ethic while at work. It was outside of work that she struggled with procrastination. She just struggled to stay focused. If she had an assignment to do that required research, she'd end up going down rabbit holes on a side topic that caught her eye. She would know it's time to stop. But if a deadline wasn't impending, she knew she could get away with pushing something off in favor of exploring her current interest. This habit is what created such a wealth of knowledge for her. Unfortunately, it also made her have to do everything last minute or even late. Since becoming an adult and responsible for her own finances, she has never filed her taxes on time. 2 years in a row, she forgot altogether. To compensate, Amelia didn't get much sleep and often slept through her alarms. It was probably her body and brain's way to ensure she got enough sleep. Her boss didn't care how good of a worker she was if she continuously showed up late. She understood that, yet she still struggled to alter her habits. On top of that, she couldn't stay late because of her grad research. She had a thesis to finish and defend. Amelia lived in a state of guilt and shame over not being better at time management, but figured she'd have time to learn how to get better at it later. Today, it was important to not be late. There was still a possibility of making it on time. She missed her first bus, but ran full speed 6 blocks to catch a different one. She had a chance to rest before her stop, and then she'd have to sprint again for the light rail. It was a tight plan, requiring more physical exertion than she was used to, especially outside in Houston in the summer. But it was better to turn up drenched in sweat than late. For once, Amelia made it to work on time. And surprisingly, she wasn't sweating or even tired. Smiling to herself, she walked into the lab, expecting a few comments razzing her for unusual timeliness. However, everyone looked stern. This wasn't unusual in a morgue where many unfortunate events cause bodies to end up here. It was especially hard when it was a child or a victim of a violent assault. Or worse, a child who was a victim of a violent assault. Occasionally, a friend or relative of one of her colleagues came through. Everyone was very professional, but an underlying awkwardness was always present. Amelia approached the body they were centered around. She looked down at herself. Shock doesn't begin to describe what she felt. Confusion, of course, was also a dominant reaction. Was this a prank? The level of cruelty involved in doing something like this as a prank was beyond her comprehension. "What the fuck?" she yelled. For once, she was not late. And this is how they treat her. No one turned to look at her or even responded. "How the fuck did you do this?" Doubt started to flood in. She grew up in the foster system. Did she have a sister she didn't know about? Did she have a twin? "Who is this?" she yelled as her frustration and fear grew. Still, no one met her eye or replied. "When did she arrive?" her colleague Nate asked. "Half an hour ago," Mike, her supervisor, replied. For once, she was early. What the actual fuck, guys? "You are going too far," she screamed. She liked these people. How could they be so cruel? Was this supposed to be some kind of lesson for her extreme tardiness? like an extreme example of what could happen if she continued living her life, always running late. Ironically, I believe she was hit by a bus while she was running for a different one, Mike suggested. Wow, death by bus, Angela quipped. This is sick. It's not funny. Who is this? She cried. Mike stepped back right into her. Literally, into her. It was slowly dawning on Amelia that this wasn't a prank. She looked down at the corpse that was obviously hers. She was dead. She was hit by a bus. It was unfathomable, but she still had a lot to do. I don't think there is a need for an autopsy, Mike announced. Slowly, everyone turned away, and Amelia took the chance to step closer to her body. Wait, she exclaimed. No one listened. Amelia remembered her last moments. She had gotten in an argument with a man near the bus stop. His attempt at catcalling was graphic and disturbing, and she told him, "Shut the fuck up, creep." He retorted with a comment suggesting she needed to be raped. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Amelia demanded. "You're an uptight bitch who needs a good dicking down, whether you want one or not," he replied. "I don't have time for this," she mumbled to herself while looking around for help. She saw a cop car across the street and started to head that way. She had to pause because a bus was rapidly approaching her stop. The last thing she remembers is being pushed. "This was not an accident," she yelled at her colleagues. Desperation set in as she realized this would be recorded as an accident instead of the murder it was. Legally, it was probably manslaughter, but when you're the one killed, you feel murdered, not manslaughtered. Her colleagues continued to go about their business as Mike filled out the paperwork. "Please look again, Mike," she said as she peered over his shoulder. She watched him type the details, or her death, which she found the most surreal event of the day. "Please," she whispered again, before going to look at her body for evidence that she had been pushed. She needed someone to turn herself over. She even reached out herself, but in her non-corporeal state, there was nothing she could do. She cried tearlessly as she lost hope. "I feel we should do something more for Amelia," Angela said. "Like plan her funeral," Mike suggested. She had no family. "I was thinking more along the lines of an autopsy," she offered. "Amelia would have wanted one." It's true. Even if she hadn't suspected an attack, she still would want an autopsy. She had already planned for her body to be donated to the body farm when she died. She had lived a life of science and wanted to continue in death. "You're right," Mike said. Before getting up, he changed the paperwork to justify an autopsy. Amelia waited as patiently as she could until it happened. Her body was finally rolled over, and there were marks indicating that she wasn't just pushed, but punched in the back with 2 fists. "Holy shit," Angela remarked. Stunned, the whole team began discussing possibilities as Amelia felt herself being pulled away. "No, I don't want to go," she cried. This would be the final rabbit hole she'd ever go down, and the most important one to her. She fought against this invisible force tugging her away because her interest was piqued. She had to know that they solved this crime. The cops needed to know, to look at security cameras so they could find this guy. She physically felt like she was in a game of tug of war, with her soul being the middle of the rope. Finally, one last tug pulled her away. There's at least one place she could not be late for. Rankor. Burning. Running down the train's aisle. Sable had to try her best to avoid people. Unfortunately, she had to push some people out the way, praying to whoever was listening that she hadn't hurt them. That's not what she wanted. She took one quick moment to look back, only to see the strange man in black still chasing her. Letting out a frustrated groan, she moved her focus back to the path in front of her, fast enough to see the upcoming obstacle, the dinner cart. Every afternoon at 1 p.m., one of the staff members would bring around the lunch cart. Sable was many a time excited to see this, but today was a different story. It now stood between her and her life. God damn it! She had to think fast, looking to the sides she thought about, maybe climbing the seats. But she thought better of it. It would take too long to scramble over them. No, the only way was over the cart. Someone was definitely going to get hurt this time. The lady that was serving lunch bent down to get something for someone from under the trolley. This was her chance. She placed her first foot on the poor lady's back, shouting an apology as shocked gasps were let out around her. Her other foot landed steadily on the top of the cart, jumping down. She landed on 2 feet, but wobbled forward, steadying herself on the arms of the chairs in front of her. But she knew she couldn't stop. Looking back again, she noticed the man in black was now fighting with people beyond the cart, smiling to herself, knowing this would but her. Sometime she kept going. When she got to the connecting door, she frantically pushed the release button. The door whizzed open. Scrambling inside, relief flooded her body when the door sealed behind her. It was only when she turned that she found herself in an empty carriage. Panic set in again when she realized that there was nowhere to hide in here. She knew her only option was to make it to the next carriage and hope to everything good that there would be somewhere to hide in there. But Sable only made it halfway to the door when the whole train jerked violently. So much so that it threw her off balance and she stumbled to the floor. To make matters even worse, as she was starting to stand up, all the lights completely shut out. Her first thought was that the energy field that kept the train safe out here in space had failed. if she wasn't terrified before she was now for a completely different reason. Hearing the whiz of the door that she had just come through, she spun around to face it. But the darkness of the carriage was too much for her to even see her hand in front of her face, squinting as if that would make it easier for her to see. A white, hot flash lit up the entire carriage. It was only a second, but she could hear the strange man's hurried footsteps coming towards her. She knew she had to move forward as quickly as she could. Without knocking herself out, she felt for the sides of the carriage. She listened and heard the footsteps stop. Now the only sound was heavy breathing from both parties. She didn't know what to do. Her mind was racing too fast. She could make a run towards where she thought the other door was to the joining carriage. But what if she tripped or ran into something? Then the strange man in black would definitely know where she was. Just like before, there was a 1-second flash of hot white light. She caught a glimpse of the man who now stood in front of her, in the middle where she once stood. Although this time, he was facing the wrong way. And so, luckily, he didn't see where she was this time. Lightning. That's what the flashes were. It must have been a power surge that had stopped the train. At least, that was one less thing to worry about. This was like a nightmare. And just when she thought it couldn't get any worse, a red glow of the emergency lights just above Sable's head flashed on her face. She couldn't move. She was frozen in place, like a statue. He would surely see her now. She wished for the lights to go back out before he turned, but it was too late. Looking back, she saw the man was now staring right at her. The look on his face said everything that Sable needed to know. Panic set in again, and she tried to think of what to do, how to get out of this, but her brain was scrambled. The man started to charge, seeing her life flash before her eyes. And that's when it came to her. A month earlier, she had been running from the man in black for the first time. Ever since she had boarded the train at Lorth, she had felt like someone was watching her, which then had escalated to her finding out that someone was definitely following her. She had sneaked onto the train, more than ready to start her new life. 2 years ago, she had seen off her twin brother, Sky, and his partner, Jess, who were to travel to Rankor first. Sable had to stay behind to sort out some debts before she left Lorth, which was easier said than done. It was when she started to rank in more debts that she decided that she was done. She missed her brother, and so she would get on the light train no matter what. She tried to hurry down the aisle, but she didn't want to bring any more attention to herself than what she already was. Sliding into the first available seat she came across, she sunk into the fabric, trying to make herself as small as possible. She suitably looked back from the side of the seat to see a strange guy, all in black, stop at the threshold of the carriage, scanning every seat, but not moving forward. Running from someone? Turning quickly to where the voice had come from, she hadn't noticed that she had sat in one seat of 4 that had a table in the middle. A man was sat directly in front of her. He slowly put down the book that he had been reading. His hair was a lightish, mousy brown and shoulder length. Sable noticed it had a slight wave to it. "No, I just thought I heard the dinner cart." She tried a smile, but she was still out of breath from running. Liar. The stranger leaned forward, placing both his elbows on the table that separated them. "You were running from someone. You tried to make it not noticeable, at which you failed miserably at. It was quite amusing, actually. Besides, the lunch cart only comes around at 1 p.m. sharp. Has done for the past 2 weeks we've been on this train." Sable squinted at the man as he smirked at her. She could have sworn that as he bared his teeth, she saw 2 fangs at either side. "So what are you going to do? We're only 2 weeks into our year-long journey to Rankor. You don't know how far you can run in this tin can. They're going to catch up with you soon enough." Sable looked to the side, trying to avoid the question. This was the first window Sable had come across on the train. Hiding in the luggage compartment, had no way to see outside, and she hadn't really had time to concentrate on her surroundings while running. She didn't know what planet they were passing, but it was beautiful. Past the energy field that surrounded the train, that shimmered of iridescent pinks and yellows. The massive planet just beyond them was a tan color. Its clouds were splodges of bright orange and dark pink. The ring that spanned around the planet was made of rock pieces that were all different shapes and sizes. Sable had to bring herself back to her reality. "I'll be fine." Looking around again, with panic streaming through her veins, she had forgot that the strange man was still looking for her. "Well, stranger, my name is Wilder, and I'm going to Rankor to start a new life of peace and hopefully happiness. How about you?" She was only half listening, more focused on trying to wait for any opening she could so she could make a run for it. Just when she thought she would have to stay in the seat a bit longer, the man in black got distracted by something behind him. Getting up out of her seat, she went to pass the stranger that she had only just caught him saying his name was Wilder. She wasn't trying to be rude, but she had no time to make friends right now. But as she went to pass him, he grabbed her arm gently. "Look, I don't have time to chat right now. I'd appropriate it if you'd let me go." And so he did, going back casually to reading his book, but not without saying one last time, "Good luck. Whistle if you need any help." Confused at what he was implying, she knew she shouldn't be wasting this opportunity to run. Looking to check the man in black was still distracted, she finally took off down the rest of the carriage. She did it without even thinking, pursued her lips together. She whistled. The strange man who had started to lunge at her again, stopped dead in his tracks, looking almost frightened. A look which faded almost instantaneously. She brought her right arm up to defend her face, but the blow never came. Lowering her arm, she looked around her to find the man in black was now crumpled in a ball at the far left wall. Light filled the carriage again, and it was like time stopped. You whistled. The man that now stood in front of her like a ghost, she remembered, was named Wilder. The same one she had met about a month ago. How did you... What? Never mind about that now. He grabbed her wrist gently and tugged her towards the door that led into the next carriage. We need to leave before someone discovers he's dead. Wilder had dragged her through 2 carriages before she stopped him. They were now looked like a kitchen area, and her eyes went straight to a knife block that sat on the counter behind where Wilder stood. He turned to see what she was looking at. Don't even think about it. I'm here to help you. Need I remind you? I just saved your life. He stood across from her, his hand raised, and finger pointed at her, like he was telling off a naughty child. I wasn't. They just caught my attention, that's all. Wilder looked at her, like he didn't believe a word she was saying. And to be fair to him, she couldn't blame him. They both leaned back on the counters, seeming to relax a little and to get their breaths back. You never answered my question. She looked up at him. This was the first time she was actually taking his image in. He was tall and slim, but he had some muscle to him. He wore slim black pants and a tan, round-necked t-shirt that was covered by a black leather jacket. His eyes were what stood out the most to Sable, though. They were the lightest blue, with little specks of green in them. Sable. My name's Sable, and I'm going to Rankor to reunite with my brother, Sky. Wilder gave her another wild smile, and once again, she caught sight of Fangs. He'd crossed his arms over his chest. Wasn't so hard, was it? Sable rolled her eyes and started to walk again. That was a thank you for saving my life. Everyone was gathered in carriages that were purely made of glass. Sable worked out fairly quickly that these rooms were made for passengers. First look at Rankor. It was an exciting event, looking at your future paradise for the first time. Sable and Wilder has spent the rest of the months on the light train, getting to know each other. He wasn't as bad as she first thought. He was funny and insightful, and after months of spending every day with him, she started to feel something for him. They both stood in the middle of the carriage. People crammed in around them. They were all waiting for the final jump. There was something I didn't tell you. Sable turned to Wilder, not expecting him to look so sheepish. What is it? I don't think the strange man in black was after her. Sable's eyebrows furrowed, and her head tilted when she spoke. What do you mean? She didn't understand. Why was he bringing this up now? They had rid themselves of that man many months ago. He was after me. He was a shadow stalker. Sable laughed. Shadow stalkers were something of legend. They hunted down and killed an ancient race of vampires. But all those stories were now like Chinese whispers. Ha! Good one. But his face was still stone cold. She'd never seen Wilder like this. But vampires don't exist. Wilder, stop being silly. We're supposed to be having a good moment. They do exist. I do exist. Sable, unconsciously, took a step away from him, just as the light train jumped, and everyone around them started to cheer. But they were only looking at each other. Confusion crossed her face when she came to a realization. The fangs. When you smile. Wait. But if he was after you all this time, then why did it seem like he was always following me? Wilder tried to walk towards her, but Sable just took another step back. Because it was me who was following you, which in turn meant that he was only technically following you. Her breath started to quicken, but she was suddenly distracted by the intense orange glow that was reflecting in Wilder's eyes. She hadn't even noticed that she hadn't been paying attention to anything but the man, if you could even call him that, in front of her. Turning quickly, the screams and sobbing of everyone around her filled her ears. It took Sable a few moments to adjust to what she was looking at. The planet in front of them, their new start, their new home, was entirely in flames. Orange flames, like veins, ran around the whole planet. They had been told that Rankor would be blooming with greens and purples, even from the outside. But now, all they saw were red and blacks. Sable didn't know when she had reached for Wilder's hand, but the only thing she could feel was his gentle squeezes to keep her grounded. Everything she had just found out was forgotten. Everyone around them were running around, crying and freaking out. Some were on their knees, heads in their hands, and their bodies shaking. Wilder would never get his life of freedom, and Sable would never see her twin again. A new life. It's like her starting over again, James thought to himself as he gazed out of the car window. I am Sisyphus. But I reached the top of the mountain only to find another that reaches steeper and higher. What then? What will happen when I reach the top? Will I ever see the view? James, you still with us, buddy? David asked as he tapped James on the forehead. Huh? Oh, yeah. I was just thinking, James replied as he continued to gaze out of the window. The trees lining the sides of the road blurred if he didn't focus on them. As the car zoomed along, James caught glimpses of the blue sky and flat farmland behind the trees. These moments were precious in a way he hadn't yet come to appreciate. Jimmy, snap out of it, Caitlin, David's girlfriend, replied. What? I'm just enjoying the scenery. It's like an 8-hour drive. Can't I just chill for a while? James said. more indifferent to talking and thinking than he'd let on. Thoughts of the future had become a burden in his bored mind, swirling around his consciousness as if they had nowhere else to go. Most of his thoughts disappeared into the ether, but not these. This is the last time we're going to be together for a while. You're moving to the big city, Caitlin replied with an upbeat attitude. She didn't even believe what she just said, but wanted to coax her friend out of his funk. Is it that obvious? What do you mean? You know I'm only a train ride away. I'm just thinking, don't worry about me. We'll be able to have all the fun when we get there, James replied, measured but dazed, all the time in the world. That's what it feels like. This exists in a space in between my past life and my future. This trip is all in the present, my moment of a finite infinity. For these last few days, my mind is exactly where it needs to be. And for that, I step outside of the bounds of time and into my own world. Will you miss all of this while you're in that concrete jungle for weeks or months at a time? David asked him. I won't be gone that long. Weeks, maybe. But that's nothing. Plus, you gotta support me chasing my dream. It's part of who I am, James replied. You didn't answer the question, Caitlin replied. Yeah, I'll probably miss it, James said. It's my home, but it's not like I'll never be back. You never know. You might like it there in the city. Then I won't regret it. Regret it? Maybe not. But you'll lose a part of yourself. Is it worth that sacrifice? I haven't even left yet. That's a pretty big assumption. Do you like who you are? Caitlin asked. What is this? James said. I thought this was a road trip, not an intervention. You didn't answer the question again. Why do I owe you an answer? Why right when you ask? That's pretty personal. No matter how long I've known you, you know where we're going, what we're going to do. You need to answer. We need to know. Why? Ugh, fine. Yes, I do. I do like myself. See, was that so difficult? No. But it was a lot of pressure on the answer. Do you feel the release? The release of confession? I guess. Exactly. I knew you'd be a great fit. Where are we going? David, you've been quiet, James asked. You'll just have to see, David replied. Shoot. 8 hours into the Canadian wilderness. It's probably not too cold. It's spring, after all. But still, do we really have a plan on where we're gonna stay? All we need is a tent, sleeping bag, some water, and food. We'll be fine, David replied. But where are we going? You said you had a plan. Don't worry about it, James. It's a surprise. The conversation died down for a while, giving James a moment of reprieve. One that he needed now more than ever. His introspective nature, combined with the uncertainty he was feeling with his friends, was beginning to take up more space in his mind. Maybe, I don't know, Dave and Kate as well as I thought. We've only been friends for a year or so, but I thought that was long enough. A vacation into the unknown, they said. A vacation into the unknown, I thought. What a wonderful way to separate my past and future. a moment outside of time. At least, metaphorically, a moment outside of time. That was the last thought that crossed James's mind as he drifted off into a light nap, waking periodically with the increasing bumps on the road as the pavement became worn. It was a clear sign that they were getting closer. The harsh winter weather would break down the concrete year after year until it turned into rubble. "Where are we?" James asked as he awoke. "You've been out for a while, like an hour?" David replied. "We're outside of the U.S. border and into Canada, just past a few towns. Hard to say exactly, though," Caitlin replied. "If you don't know where we are, how do you know where we're going? Also, how did we go through the border without either you or the border officials waking me up?" "Oh, don't worry. We just grabbed your passport out of your bag, and they let us go." "You went through my bag?" James replied, as he looked over and saw everything tousled around, some items still in the bag and others outside. But either way, it was chaotic. How did I sleep for so long? I just took a sip of my water and passed out. "Don't worry so much. We were just trying to let you sleep. With all the time we have left, we figured you wouldn't mind putting your bag back together." "Wait, how long was I out? Where's my phone? That clock doesn't seem right." The views outside the car had turned into green trees, but instead of farmland behind them, there were just more trees. They kept whizzing by, but if he focused on the mountain painted across the sky in front of him, everything was steady, and the trees were clear. The north face. That's what they've been talking about. The north face of the mountain, leaving all of society behind for a while. Nobody exists on the other side of that mountain. We will become truly alone. Is that why I've been thinking of this? "James, you got all quiet for a moment," David asked. "I just spaced out. My bad," James replied. "Yeah, don't worry about my bag. Thanks for letting me sleep." The mountain grew larger as they approached. Seemingly every few minutes, there was a noticeable change in the horizon. The mountain is growing, but the clock is barely changing. How is that possible? It's like we've driven hours in minutes. The closer we get, the faster everything seems to speed up. Where the hell am I? What's going on here? "We're here," Caitlin said, with a tone of excitement and playfulness. James opened the car door and stepped outside. It was like nothing he had ever seen. The mountain was all around them, like a cylinder cut out of rock, as high as he could see. The car was in a clearing, but broadly, there were more of the green coniferous trees that surrounded the mountain. It was dark outside, and as James craned his neck towards the sky, the constellations were so luminescent. From the moment that I stepped out of the car into this other world, I couldn't hear a sound. It was so quiet, like shifting between realms. But now, all I can hear is the sound of that hum, James's thoughts became frantic. A consistent hum. Sometimes voices. More voices. Chaotic whispers echoing across the open cavern. Where are David and Caitlin? The trunk is open, but they're gone? How is that possible? What am I doing in these clothes? What am I doing here? What's this? A red robe? I see the smiles coming out of the trees. The voices are getting louder. Please, God, give me a chance to climb that mountain. I want to be Sisyphus again. I know where I am now, and all I want to do is be back home, ready to go to the concrete jungle, ready to climb the mountain. January 21st. It was another one of those days. The rain was pouring down like iron sheets. The train had come half an hour late, and I had lost my wallet in the station bathroom. In moments like these, you truly wonder whether a higher power was out to get you. When the train finally pulled up at 1:30, I glared it down. Most people would have been blown away by the pristine white sheen, the unnatural silence of the engine, or the blast of sub-zero aircon that streamed out of the open doors. But not me. 21 years of life had taught me enough about the world. I trudged onto the carriage at the end and plopped myself down on the backmost seat. If I had been just 10 years younger, no, even 2 months younger, I might have enjoyed the richness of the leather or the antique smell of the wooden armrests. But I wasn't the young fool that I once was. As we slowly pulled out of the gloomy building, I finally let out the breath I had been holding in all day. I knew where I was going, of course. I knew what I was going to do. Even without the map pasted on the chair in front of me, I knew the name of my destination in advance. Sunset Station, where my path ended. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain clatter against the window, like bullets. The last I'd ever enjoy, I supposed. I fiddled with a golden chain strung around my neck. Not even a minute passed by when someone tapped my shoulder. Is this seat taken? I prized my eyes open and felt my heart skip a beat. She had flawless skin, about a shade darker than sandstone. Her jet black hair cascaded down in smooth waterfalls, gently brushing against her lower back. They formed a loose curtain over her chocolate eyes, which glittered like galaxies. A burgundy jacket was draped over her shoulders, the velvet seeming softer than cat fur. Her nails were dabbed with a light layer of wine nail polish, complementing her lips. Something about her seemed oddly familiar to me, even though I'd never met her before. Is it taken? She repeated. Her voice was a soft jingle, a quiet chortle. I blinked. No, I let out a tiny groan when she plopped herself down, the smell of vanilla following her. The one thing I didn't want to do was engage in conversation on the tail end of my journey. So of course, it was the first thing that happened. We sat in silence for a while, the pinging of the bullets of rain making the only sound in the carriage. I glanced out the window and heaved a sigh. The same flooded fields, dreary hills, the same ashen sky. I guess it wasn't much to miss. The speakers crackled to life, interrupting my train of thought. Welcome on board the Destiny Line. The next stop is Sunset Station, where this service ends. Sunset, sunset, sunset. Are you going to Sunset Station? The woman asked. I started and silently cursed myself. Oh, yes, I am. Didn't mean to disturb you. I chanced a glance at her face again. Where had I seen her before? A wide grin spread, flashed across her rose lips. That's splendid, she purred, blatantly ignoring all of the subtle hints I was dropping. As if on cue, she swiveled towards me. I heard there's a beautiful, ethereal wooden bridge there that overlooks a waterfall. You planning on going? My journey ends there. I didn't bother elaborating. She tilted her head, studying me as if I were a helpless guinea pig. I hated that, the way her brown eyes drilled right through me and came out the other side. There was something off about her. I just couldn't place my finger on what it was. Why did it all seem so eerily familiar? So you have gone there before, she pressed, her breath the sickening smell of peppermint. Surely you must have gone there with someone else. Yes. The word slipped out of my mouth like an eel slipping out of wet hands. How delightful, she exclaimed with a sharp giggle. I did too. Who did you go with? The question was a wrecking ball. Who? Her voice was a gong, the words, the beats ringing in my mind. My fiancé. Her stare was like a magnet, drawing out the words from my lips. Or, at least, she was. My voice was dark and bitter. What business do you have with my life? I'm only interested in my own life. She stared at her palms. At least, I hope I am. Something happened to me, and I need your help in making sense of it. That struck a chord with me. I'm sure you loved her, as I once did to my boyfriend. She was the fire to my ice, the black to my white, the day to my night, the sun to my moon, the joy to my grief, the good to my evil, the hope to my grief, the solace to my rage, the life to my death. We were worlds and eons apart, but we were perfect together. Every second I spent with her was an hour of paradise. The ground she stepped on was kissed by God. She was my Polaris when I was sailing across the ocean of my life. A single teardrop crept down my cheek, the hot scar of the past. She's dead now. Since when? Since 2 months ago. Died in a tragic accident. I coughed and started fiddling with the chain again. Something flashed in the woman's eyes. Car crash, shattered spine. Her Her voice sounded like an autumn breeze, hiding the cold of winter in the warmth of summer. Dead in the night of the 21st of January. Each word she spoke sent flashes of red across my vision. Gray Malibu came out of nowhere. Yeah? I narrowed my eyes at the woman. How did you know? My boyfriend knew someone who died on the 21st in a car crash as well. She cleared her throat. How did you meet her? At a university. We both majored in criminology. We matched each other's cautiousness and prudence. And you studied in criminology as well. Met him when I was an undergraduate. It's funny, really, how similar our two stories are. It truly was. She turned to me again, scanning me up and down. What aren't you telling me? What do I have to tell you? The real question is, what aren't you telling me? Sighing, she murmured, I'm trying to find out why my life took a turn for the worse 2 months ago. And now, suddenly, this morning, I woke up to find that no one knew me, and the world's colors were bleached. So please, I need your help. Her lips were truly interesting. The way they pursed. They were perfectly arched, like Cupid's bow. Where had I seen them before? What do you need my help with on the day of the accident? What were you feeling? Grief. Are you sure? What kind of question is that? Of course I was. Again. Are you sure? What are you implying here? I spat, clenching my fists. I hated her so much then. The way she never flicked her eyes off of me for 1 second. What I'm saying, she continued, is that you and I both know that you felt something else that night. Guilt. Her voice was the buzz of a beehive. I doubt most people would have liked it. I swear, though, I heard it somewhere before. In the distance, the train began to whistle. I chanced a glance out the window. The rainy plains had been blotted out by a black tunnel. The Stygian wall was a nice reflection of my mind, I suppose. All aboard the Destiny Express. Yes, I snarled. I felt guilty. I felt guilty because we'd been arguing right before she ran out of the house. I tried to call her back. She didn't even look. Before she dashed across the road, something clicked inside my head. But you knew that already, didn't you? Goosebumps spread across my arm when she nodded. The hazy puzzle was slowly getting clearer. What were you arguing about? Why would I think it would be better for both of us if you stopped hiding the truth, she interrupted. So, I'm going to ask again. What were you quarreling about? I'm sorry. Those deep brown eyes weren't galaxies. That was my mistake. They were black holes, sucking in everything. I was confronting her about what I saw that afternoon. My voice was black ice. I came home early, and I discovered that there were 2 other people in the house, being intimate with each other. The man, I still don't know who. The woman? Well, needless to say, I did know who it was. I shuddered. She nodded again, slower this time. What did she say to you when you confronted her? That I didn't really love her? that I never really did, that I was exploiting her for money. Were you? Well, I filched the occasional penny or two. I winced under her glare. Fine. I forced her to pay for my tuition fees. She has so much money that she doesn't know what to do with it anyhow. Might as well put it to good use. I toyed with my golden chain again. The woman didn't seem to agree with me, but she moved on. All right. I think you've helped me clear up a lot of problems now. Before I could heave a sigh of relief, she continued. But there's still one last question I want to ask you. What could that be? I started rubbing my fingers against the golden chain. The chain had the dull, tingling smell of iron. Just like something else. Something could dark wrap. Where were you at the moment of the accident? Shadows gathered around her eyes. I told you already. Which is where, again, steel hands gripped my lungs. I was calling out to her, trying to stop her from recklessly dashing. She didn't listen to me. Was I imagining things? Or was there a flicker somewhere on her face? No, her neck was flickering. It was slowly bending, slowly becoming deformed. Or was I imagining things? She spoke 2 words. You're lying. The temperature seemed to plummet. What? You're lying. You know it in your heart. You've known for 2 months. Oh my. Death is a lie. No, no, no. It couldn't be happening. But it was staring right back at me. The truth clicked, like the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle fitting in. I knew now. I knew everything. Fine. 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 I admit it. I wasn't running after her. I wasn't calling out to her. I wasn't trying to stop her. No. I'm a double-faced liar. Yes, that's what I am. A psychopath. My fiancée did not die in an accident. I killed her. I killed her. I killed her. I killed her. I dragged her out of the house. I threw her in front of a speeding gray Malibu. Oh, I watched her die. I knew it in my bones. Oh, then what are you? How are you here? Haunting me to my very last day. Why have you come back? Why? Are you even real? That, she whispered. You will never know. You have lived 2 months in anguish because I never truly left you. Every hour of your life has felt like a tortured second crawling by. Just look at what's hanging from your neck, the golden mark of Cain. I tore it off the chain and pressed it against my face. No, forgive me, please. Tears streamed down my face, a waterfall of guilt. I'll do anything. The train came to a stop at the station. Sunset. The end of the line. Oh, her smile. I hated her smile. The way they were draped over the fury within her. She she glanced out the window, out of the station, out of the world. I followed her gaze at the bridge overlooking the waterfall, where it all began. There's always a way out. She stood up. How horrible she looked. The way her head was tilted to the side, almost as if her spine was broken. I trust you'll know what to do. Goodbye, Dago. She stepped off the train to the end of the line. When I was a child, I loved trains. Pretty typical little boy enchantment, I think. Wooden tracks and tiny metal wheels. 100 different configurations across my bedroom floor, with the train track pattern carpet. We lived in the countryside, and the trains only ran through the city, so seeing the real thing on a rare outing was like Christmas and birthdays combined. I remember even when I got older that my mother and I would stop at the side of the footpath to watch as they shot over the tracks. I never liked Thomas the Tank Engine, though. The faces creeped me out. I'm mostly neutral about trains now, I think. Adulthood makes you neutral about the things that excited you in childhood, or they encourage you to act like you're neutral about them. I started taking the train daily in my second year of university, and I guess it lost some of its shininess, but I was never as miserable with the journey as some of my fellow commuters. If I had to sit for 40 minutes either way, might as well spend it on a speed-smooth train, watching the landscape shoot by like I'd imagined as a kid. I can't say there's a lot of joy in it today, even if it seems a little fitting in some ways. Beginning and end, you know. A child dreaming of trains, and an adult booking it to the fastest one possible. I still push through to my usual car, the one with the most windows and the best views, opting to look our desecrated landscape in the eyes as we passed over it. The car is emptier than I thought it would be. Are people not flocking to the trains, desperate for a seat? A chance to watch everything flying past? And I settle where I can watch the landscape and the car around me from the same place. I rode to the end of the line once, when I had first moved to the city, and just wanted to quietly indulge that train-loving child still in my chest. I moved from seat to seat as the train emptied, getting the best views and just existing in the feeling. I think I was listening to Imagine Dragons, or something equally fitting for my youth. Just watching everything fly past and trying not to think about grades and professor and facsimiles of friends. All of that stuff had seemed so important back then, like it was the whole world. Today, I'll make that same trip. The end of the line with my eyes on the horizon. No music, though. Today, I'll keep my focus sharp. The car fills slowly and brings with it more commotion than usual. Groups of people talking in frantic pitches and hysterical sobs. Some are dark and grouchy. Those pessimistic, I told you so people. Some are trying to project sunlight through their shaking hands, smiling and saying how much better things will be at the end of the line. All of them are afraid. I am too, but I'm glad to be on the train. The train seems to be faster than usual when it at last sets off. I suppose safety restrictions around speed don't matter anymore. It's still safer than off the train, and there's less to worry about when nothing is coming in the other direction. When we pass the motorway, everything is the same. All the cars heading north, nothing passing the other way. All the lanes filled up to the brim. Those are the people who couldn't leave a thing behind, who filled their seats with books and family heirlooms and nice coats. A nice thought, but none of them will make it to the north. That's what the men across the car are saying, shaking heads to hide their shaking hands. We ride for maybe half an hour before someone spots them. It starts with gasps of horror among friends, pointing and screaming. Then a child crying uncontrollably in one of the further cars. There are packs of them on the highway, stopping the cars and creating barricades to capture as many drivers as possible. A few of the trucks and four-wheel drives manage to push their way off the asphalt and rattle down onto the grass, careening wildly into any direction that is away, for any dwindling possibility of safety. Some of them make it, but even then, that's only for now. We've seen enough now to know that the carnage will only grow. We all know that the North isn't going to be safe for much longer either, but trains are good for running. We can leave it behind for a little while. They don't go after the electric cars, someone pointed out a few weeks into the first attack, drawn to the noise of the gas guzzlers maybe, or the stink of the exhaust. Back then, the attacks were still distant enough that you could brush that off as propaganda from parent to child, a myth to encourage quiet voices and regular bathing. But it went from an unreal kind of warning to a stark reality, with patrols in the streets and locked doors and halting economy. Then the conspiracy theorists reasoned it was government propaganda, some kind of leftist agenda to keep the gas cars off the streets. But then the patrols all got turned, and then nobody really felt safe enough to joke about it anymore. They were saying this city would be the first to go. It looked like something out of a movie from 2014 that teenagers watched religiously, swearing up and down that it wasn't just some dark fiction, but a prediction of the future. This was where we were heading. Kind of ironic, because everyone ignored them, even though the main character of every movie was a teenager being ignored. I guess there were plenty of warnings. We were still all so late to pack up and leave. I guess I felt like it was a weird thing to do alone. Great timing, social anxiety in the midst of the apocalypse. But even now, on the train, everyone's in a group. Those teenagers' girls hyperventilating with their Stanley drink bottles by the windows. Those elderly folks joining wrinkled hands and sharing memories they're grateful for in the aisle seats. The grizzled old men trying to pretend they don't care about each other when they'd waited for the others to leave, risked their lives in doing so. They're always in groups in the movies, too, even if only so one of them can get infected and traumatize the rest of them. Maybe I shouldn't have moved so far away. I would at least have my mother then, probably disturbingly nonchalant about the whole deal. As infected numbers grew and showed in increasingly graphic fashion on the evening news, "They won't get us," she would be saying, maybe doing some knitting or embroidery or something equally casual. "They're still people," I would say. My train sets wouldn't be out anymore, but I'd still have them tucked into an old wooden chest. Maybe I'd be sitting on it, gravitating to them as I gravitated to everything from childhood. And when it came to the north, when the screams were without turning on the TV, I wondered if she'd show fear then, or simply lock the door and light the fire. I probably could have unlocked the door with black in the whites of my eyes, crawling up my veins, sobbing hideous ichor as the infection twisted my brain, begged me to find a new vessel, begged me to become that which I'd been running from. She would be too stubborn to run then. I would tell her that it wanted me to kill, wanted me to submit and drag down whoever I could. And she would offer her chest and her veins and take the pain that way. "It's always been you and me, Buck," she'd say, without a trace of sadness or regret. "Bring me with you. We'll see what comes next." They're coming closer to the train now. Someone is praying in a faltering fashion that suggests they might not have bothered in a long time. The conductor's voice comes over the intercom. "Stay calm. The tracks are clear, and we're making good time." But it doesn't do anything to calm anybody. We're in the frontmost car, so they'll reach us last. But we'll also be the last to see them coming. It would have been nice to travel in a group, but I've never been very good at groups. Nobody ever feels the same as you about everything, which means that everybody sucks at least a little bit. It's still nice to imagine conversation, but the imagined conversation is much more between several variations of myself. The me in early college that's listening to Imagine Dragons, watching the apocalypse, and thinking about those homework due dates that we won't live to see. The child me playing with wooden trains and cheering to pass them in the street, maybe once or twice a year. For a moment, I consider sending a photo to my mother. Consider asking her if she would want to be infected if it was me, or if I should roam with the pack and see her later. We haven't been talking much lately either. She sends me a link to Facebook sometimes, and I send her a picture of the meal I door-dashed sitting in a dirty pan. I don't know how to segue into asking her how she wants me to die. There's a fresh wave of screaming and sobbing, twice the finality of anything else. And it takes me a moment to realize it's coming, not from another car, but from the very front, where the conductor sits. I brace myself before the impact, but it's not any use. The train flips over itself. Something left on the tracks, probably. Or the metal itself chewed and twisted away. Everyone is screaming, and we all tumble over each other as the car tumbles and glass smashes in all directions. Some people huddle further into the rubble as if they could ever stay hidden. Some pick themselves out, bleeding and shattered, and try to run. I've come to terms with the inevitable. I don't think anyone can run or hide. I think this is it, but I got to have one last ride on my way to the end. They're coming. They're coming. The whispers carried by the wind. The repeat of words started yesterday morning from the moment my bare feet touched the wooden planks of the wrapped-around porch. The corn swayed slowly. Anticipation, knowing they would soon pick up their speed. Sounds of the horses shifting around the fields, anxiety fueling them. They knew just as well as I did what was to come. The clouds in the distance were dense. The light around the house shined bright for now. The blanket of clouds would take that away. Soon, too soon. The pitter-patter of little feet sounded from behind me. A hand wrapping around my finger, giving a slight tug. Her bright blue eyes would be boring into me. Those beautiful eyes she adopted from her father. If only he was here, they wouldn't be coming. They would leave us be. They would keep their distance. They knew what the consequences were, but no contact, no letters, no information of where he was or when he would come home, left us in the foreboding shadows. The war was bound to come. Unfortunately, we knew that. The day the papers came, he looked at me. The look of knowing all too well. He would be called upon, leaving us to fend for ourselves, while he went God knows where, to defend the great land we call home. The last letter received was over a month ago now. We sent one in return within the week. Concerns the officers would come bringing devastating news filled the house, weighing the air down. Another tug released me from my trance. I looked down, mustering a smile as best I could. Guiding her back into the house, setting her up in the chair for breakfast. Eggs, toast, and fresh bacon from one of the sows lay in front of her. Coffee was the choice for me. Hunger was gone. I felt nothing of the sorts. Thirst controlled me. Coffee, water, and milk satisfied me for the time being. A bang sounded outside. My eyes snapped to see through the fogged window from grime. Something else to add to my list of things to do. The dust and dirt picking up from the fields created a layer. A goat was taking time to practice butting again, lining up to go again with one of the poles surrounding them. The clouds were closer. Too much to do before they would be here. Too little time. Another tug. This time, my dress. I felt the hole in the side tear a little bit more. Another thing to fix around this place. I turned. Her shoes were on her feet, and mine were in her hands. The plate behind her was polished off, and the cup with remnants of milk sat beside it. Her head cocked to the side. A nod returned. Sliding my feet into my boots, we headed out to accomplish the never-ending tasks plaguing us. Night fell quickly, and the clouds were almost here. By morning, they would be on top of us. The sounds of the restless animals in the barn through the open window next to my bed. Creaks of the old house moving with the wind, called out in various parts. The nerves, the knowing of what's coming, getting to me, all while she slept peacefully in her bed. No worries in the world, aside from making sure the animals were happy, and her father was okay. The adolescent hopes and dreams occupying her mind. Mine was screaming at me. Too many thoughts, too many fears, all flicking through, ready to explode out. The hope of tea helping the pain and pressure, all while it did nothing at all. It usually did not, but I lived by it as my mother had too. Lessons she taught me, guided me quite frequently. That being just one of them. They're coming. I shuddered with the wind as it brought that news. Constant reminders. I wanted to scream out. I know all too well. Instead, I stayed quiet, fighting to go to sleep to earn some peace. Peace would not come, however. My dreams would be filled with thoughts of them coming. My husband, my child, not getting everything they need. The idea of peace is just that. An idea, a hope. There was none for me. The sounds were pounding by the time my eyes opened. Light barely came through the windows. The clouds were here, and so was the shadow. My feet pounded, carrying me out onto the porch. The corn stalks now looked like they were laying down, the wind rearing its ugly face. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. The words pounded into me. My eyes watered, dirt flying into them. I felt my way to the sink, rinsing them out as best I could. Turning, she was behind me again, head cocked to the side. Quickly fixing oatmeal, she ate while I worried. Opting to give her time off today, I set her up with her favorite things in the living room. Not before getting her dressed in her Sunday best. No hair out of place, and a bow matching her shoes. The wind howled outside. They're coming, quickly. I needed to get everything done, quickly. Forgetting my shoes, I headed to the barn. multitasking, not without dropping things. The grime now covered me, just as it did the windows. Hurry, you must hurry. Stepping out of the barn, a cloud of dust was nearing. Pounding of horseshoes coming down the way, carried with the wind, just as the words did. They're coming, minutes, a matter of minutes, and they would be here. The dust rounded the drive at the far end of the field. My feet ran me into the house and to the bathroom. Grabbing a cloth, I wet it down and scrubbed at my flesh. The grime coming off, slowly it felt. I was running out of time. Finally, getting the last mark off, I put my Sunday best on, running my fingers through my hair. Standing in the doorway, she was beside me, watching the cloud of dust get closer. They're coming. The wind howled again. They're coming. In the silence of ashes. Jacob's fingers trembled against the dented tin cup. Water sloshing perilously close to the rim. The November air carved his lungs raw, bitter with smoke from chimneys that transformed flesh to ash. His worn shoes navigated the mud between barracks, sidestepping puddles that mirrored a colorless sky. At 13, Jacob had perfected invisibility. 3 years of silence, not by choice, but necessity after witnessing his father's execution, had rendered him a ghost among the living dead that shuffled through the camp. While other boys his age had been selected for immediate disposal, Jacob's muteness had ironically preserved him. The guards found utility in a servant who could never repeat their secrets, who existed in the peripheral shadows of their consciousness. The SS officers spoke freely in his presence. Plans whispered, transports scheduled, executions ordered, all captured in the flawless vault of Jacob's mind, where every detail existed in perfect recall, a gift that had once earned him praise from teachers in another lifetime, before yellow stars and cattle cars. Obersturmführer Kruger waited in his usual spot, a folding chair positioned in the sliver of shade beside Barracks 7. Jacob knew the man's habits with precision. The hat removal, 17 minutes into his shift. The triple tap of his boot before sitting. The heavy eyes, exactly 40 minutes after lunch. Schneller, Junge! Kruger barked, gesturing impatiently as Jacob approached. Jacob quickened his pace, keeping his eyes fixed on the shallow pool of water in the cup. One did not look directly at the gods of this underworld. The men who decided, with casual flicks of their fingers, who would breathe another day and who would feed the insatiable furnaces. Kruger snatched the cup, gulping noisily. Water escaped his lips, tracking through the dust on his chin. Jacob stood motionless, hands clasped before him, awaiting dismissal or further orders. The guard's eyes were bloodshot, the whites yellowed like old paper. Night duty in the processing center, Jacob surmised. New transports had arrived yesterday, which always meant sleepless shifts for the guards. Wait, Kruger muttered, settling deeper into his chair. I might want more. Jacob nodded once, the barest acknowledgement of the command. He knew stillness, as others knew prayer. A ritual of survival, practiced until it became reflex. The camp existed in constant motion. Guards shouting, prisoners shuffling, machine guns occasionally stuttering their terrible poetry of death. To be still was to disappear. Minutes stretched. Kruger's head gradually lolled forward, his breathing deepening. The cup tilted dangerously in his loosening grip. Jacob watched through lowered lashes as the guard surrendered to sleep. The keys hanging from Kruger's belt caught the weak sunlight, transforming ordinary metal into something mythic. Freedom incarnate. Jacob's pulse accelerated, blood rushing in his ears like distant artillery. No guard ever slept on duty. The punishment was severe. Perhaps not death, but certainly disgrace. This aberration might never repeat itself. A singular crack in the impenetrable wall of captivity. Jacob's mind calculated with the precision of mathematics. 4 minutes until the patrol passed the northern fence. 7 minutes until roll call at the women's barracks would divert attention eastward. The electric generator hummed 60 meters to the west, powering the final barrier between imprisonment and possibility. His fingers, trained by years of obedience, trembled with rebellion as they reached toward the key ring. A lifetime compressed to a single breath as metal brushed against metal with the whisper of butterfly wings. The ring slid free. Jacob backed away silently, the keys clutched against his chest like a talisman. The dormant power they represented sent electric currents through his body, awakening nerves long numbed by survival. For the first time in 3 years, a ghost became solid. A shadow contemplated substance. A boy allowed himself to remember the concept of hope. The keys felt impossibly heavy in Jacob's pocket as he slipped between the skeletal shadows of barracks. His mind projected every detail of the camp upon the canvas of his consciousness. A perfect map etched by thousands of forced errands. There, the blind spot behind the infirmary, where guards rarely patrolled. Here, the drainage ditch that ran beneath the eastern fence, partially obscured by withered weeds. Each movement demanded precision, as afternoon shadows stretched across the packed earth. Jacob became one with them. Another darkness, moving among darkness, his emaciated form barely disturbing the air. The camp's architecture revealed itself differently now. What had been a prison became a puzzle box, and Jacob held the solution in his trembling hand. 327 steps to the generator shed, a left turn at the kitchens, skirt the infirmary, avoid the dogs kenneled near the northern guard tower. Gunther, the shepherd with the white spot on his muzzle, raised his head as Jacob passed downwind. The animal's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. Jacob froze, becoming stone. The dog's amber eyes held his for an eternal moment before dismissing him. Just another walking skeleton, carrying neither food nor threat. Jacob released the breath he'd been holding and continued his careful trajectory toward freedom. The world had shrunk to immediate sensations. Ribs against lungs, the metallic taste of fear, fabric against skin. Nothing existed beyond this moment of movement, this singular pursuit of escape. A sudden commotion erupted near the eastern fence. Jacob pressed himself against Barracks 12, becoming one with its weathered planks as two guards rushed past. Not for him, not yet. The keys remained undiscovered. As the guards disappeared, Jacob continued his journey through the camp's service areas, places where a silent child became as invisible as dust motes in sunlight. He reached the narrow passage between buildings where mud gave way to gravel, treacherous ground that might announce his presence. Jacob moved with the deliberate care of a tightrope walker, testing each step. A soft sound stopped him. A whimper, barely audible, drifting from beneath the elevated supply depot. Jacob hesitated, freedom calling from just beyond. The sensible choice was clear. Continue, escape, survive. Yet he found himself crouching, peering into the darkness beneath the structure. 5 pairs of eyes reflected the meager light. Children, younger than himself, huddled together like rabbits in a warren. Their gaunt faces registered shock at his discovery. One boy raised a finger to cracked lips, pleading for silence that Jacob had mastered years ago. They had escaped a selection. That much was obvious. Children deemed too small for work were immediate candidates for the chambers. These 5 had somehow slipped away, hiding in this temporary sanctuary, while death searched elsewhere. Jacob knew their fate was sealed. The hiding place would be discovered within hours. The dogs would find them, or hunger would drive them into the open. Their brief rebellion against inevitability would end, as all rebellions did in this place, with smoke rising from chimneys. His hand closed around the keys in his pocket. One boy, for certain, could navigate the camp's dangers. 5 children multiplied the risk exponentially. Mathematics again. Probability, chance, the cold equations of survival. The smallest child, a girl with eyes too large for her hollowed face, extended one skeletal hand toward him, not begging, not pleading, offering connection, humanity. Something the camp had systematically stripped away layer by layer until only animal survival remained. Jacob's memory flashed to his father's final words before the guards beat him silent. Remember who you are. He made his decision with quick, Efficient gestures. Jacob motioned for them to follow. The children untangled themselves from their hiding place, emerging like shadows gaining substance. Their movements were clumsy with fear and weakness, but their eyes held absolute focus on Jacob, their unexpected savior, their silent Moses. The smallest girl slipped her hand into his. Her palm was fever hot against his cold fingers. The contact sent electricity through Jacob's arm, awakening something long dormant. Responsibility, connection, purpose beyond mere survival. Together, they became a small constellation of desperate stars, moving through the gathering twilight toward the generator shed and the possibility of freedom beyond. The generator shed vibrated at the camp's edge. Its drone masked 6 pairs of feet, navigating between the fences as Jacob led with a cartographer's confidence. Evening patrol would begin in 17 minutes. Searchlights would sweep the eastern perimeter in 12. The rhythm of the camp's security beat within Jacob's consciousness, like a second heartbeat. The smallest girl, her name yet unspoken between them, clung to his hand with surprising strength. Behind them, the other children followed in a chain of desperate hope, each grasping the clothing of the one ahead. Their collective breath formed ghostly plumes in the November air, spectral evidence of lives not yet extinguished. Jacob reached the generator shed's rusted door. 3 keys tried, 3 keys rejected, before the 4th slid home. The lock surrendered with a reluctant click that seemed thunderous in his heightened awareness. He ushered the children inside, pulling the door closed behind them. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the red glow of indicator lights. The smell of oil and metal replaced the camp's perpetual stench of suffering. The generator's pulse vibrated through the concrete floor into their bones. Jacob's memory reconstructed the shed's interior with perfect clarity. He had been brought here once to clean grease spills, one of countless menial tasks assigned to the camp's silent shadow. His fingers traced metal casings and wire housing until he found what he sought, the main control panel. Behind him, the children huddled together for warmth and courage. The oldest boy, perhaps 10, whispered something in Polish that Jacob couldn't understand. The words dissolved into the mechanical growl surrounding them. Language had become irrelevant. Only action mattered now. Through the shed's single grimy window, Jacob watched lights flicker on across the camp as day surrendered to evening. Searchlights awakened, their harsh beams cutting white arcs through gathering darkness. Guards emerged from barracks, rifles slung across shoulders. Somewhere, Obersturmführer Kruger would be awakening to the realization of his catastrophic error. Jacob's hands hovered over the generator's controls. His perfect memory recalled every wire, every connection observed during his brief exposure to the machine's inner workings. Disabling it would plunge the camp into darkness and deactivate the electrified fence. But the backup systems would engage within minutes. Their window for escape would be measured in heartbeats. A distant alarm shattered the twilight. A shrill mechanical scream that announced discovery. Whether Kruger's missing keys or the children's absence had triggered it remained unknown. The distinction was academic. The hunt had begun. The smallest girl pressed herself against Jacob's side, her body trembling like a captured bird. He placed a reassuring hand on her head, then turned his attention back to the generator. Its massive form contained both their imprisonment and their salvation. Jacob seized a wrench from a nearby workbench and wedged it between critical gears. With calculated force, he twisted until metal screamed against metal. Sparks erupted in blue-white constellations, reflected in the wide eyes of the watching children. The generator's rhythm faltered, coughed, then disintegrated into mechanical death throes. Lights across the camp flickered, dimmed, and died. Darkness descended like a blessing, punctuated only by the crimson pulse of emergency lights and the distant, frantic beams of guards' flashlights. Jacob yanked the shed door open. Freedom waited in the gathering night, separated from them by a single fence, now rendered harmless. He gestured urgently to the children, pointing toward the eastern boundary, where forest began 200 meters beyond the perimeter. Dogs barked in the distance, savage, hungry sounds that accelerated their terror into action. The children poured from the shed like water finding its level, Jacob bringing up the rear. The smallest girl's hand remained locked in his as they navigated by instinct and starlight toward the fence. With his free hand, Jacob tested the metal mesh. No electricity hummed beneath his fingertips. The backup generators had not yet engaged. He boosted the smallest children over first, their bird-like bodies barely disturbing the wire. The older ones climbed with desperate strength, tumbling to freedom on the other side as searchlights swept closer and dogs barking intensified. Jacob hoisted himself upward, muscles straining against the weight of exhaustion and malnutrition. Barbed wire tore through his threadbare clothing, carving shallow furrows into his flesh. Pain registered as distant information, irrelevant to the imperative of movement. He dropped to the ground beyond the fence, landing beside the waiting children. The absent hum of electricity had been replaced by shouts and whistles, the camp awakening to their rebellion. Jacob pointed toward the dark line of trees in the distance. "Run," he mouthed silently, the word forming on lips that had forgotten speech. Together, they fled across open ground, 6 shadows merging with the greater darkness. Behind them, Flashlight beams swept the area around the disabled generator. Ahead, the forest promised concealment, if not safety. The space between represented the most dangerous passage of their lives. Exposed, vulnerable, illuminated by nothing but faith and starlight. The forest swallowed them whole. Pine needles cushioned their footfalls as the scent of resin replaced the camp's miasma with air that tasted of possibility. Jacob led them deeper into the wilderness, away from searchlights that strafed the forest edge like mechanical predators. Behind them, the camp's alarms continued their frantic cry, a sound that diminished with each step, but remained embedded in their consciousness like a splinter beneath skin. The smallest girl stumbled, her strength finally failing. Jacob caught her before she fell, lifting her slight weight into his arms. She weighed no more than autumn leaves, her bones fragile as a bird's beneath his hands. Her head came to rest against his shoulder. Absolute trust in the gesture. They continued for what might have been hours or minutes. Time had dissolved into meaningless abstraction. Distance alone mattered now. Every meter gained was a victory against death. The other children followed Jacob without question, their faith in his silent guidance absolute. A stream appeared, silver in the moonlight. Jacob gestured for them to drink. The water tasted of stone and stars, reviving something beyond their physical bodies. Perhaps hope, perhaps humanity. The oldest boy spoke, his voice a rusty hinge breaking the forest's solemn quiet. Loosen your vital gate. Must we go further? Jacob nodded, pointing deeper into the forest. The danger had not passed. Dogs could track them for kilometers. Morning would bring planes, searchers, consequences. The Reich did not surrender its prisoners easily, especially those who carried knowledge of what transpired behind electrified fences. The smallest girl stirred in his arms, her eyes reflecting fragments of moonlight. Her lips moved, forming words that emerged as a whisper. Jak się nazywasz? What is your name? The question penetrated layers of silence, built over years of survival. Jacob hadn't heard his own name spoken aloud since his father's death. It existed only in memory, a secret thing preserved from contamination by the camp's horrors. His throat constricted around unspoken syllables. Speech had become foreign territory, a country from which he had been exiled. Yet something stirred within the wasteland of his voice, a seed breaking through frozen ground after endless winter. Jacob, he whispered, the sound strange and wonderful in the forest's embrace. His voice emerged broken, raw with disuse, but undeniably his own. Jestem Jakob. I am Jacob. The girl's smile transformed her hollow face, revealing the ghost of beauty that starvation had nearly erased. "Estera," she replied, offering her name as a gift in exchange for his. The other children murmured their own names: Tomasz, Lilka, Beniek, David, each syllable a reclamation of identity. The camp had attempted to replace with numbers. They stood in a tight circle beneath the ancient pines, no longer prisoners, not yet survivors, suspended in the fragile space between captivity and freedom. A distant howl shattered their momentary peace, the unmistakable voice of a tracking dog catching their scent. The hunt continued. Jacob set Estera gently on her feet and pointed westward, where the forest grew denser, offering deeper concealment. "Musimy biec," Estera said with quiet resolve. "We must run." Jacob nodded, taking her hand once more. Together, they plunged deeper into the wilderness. 6 children against an empire, armed with nothing but the desperate courage of those with nothing left to lose. The forest embraced them, branches parting to accept their flight, roots steadying their uncertain steps. Dawn found them huddled beneath a rocky overhang beside a wider stream. Exhaustion had claimed the younger children, while Jacob remained awake, listening to the forest's morning chorus, replacing the mechanized rhythms of captivity. Estera sat beside him, her slight shoulder pressed against his arm. "Dokąd idziemy?" "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the stream's gentle murmur. Jacob's mind, so accustomed to precision and calculation, could offer no certain answer. The geography of freedom remained unmapped territory. He had memorized every centimeter of captivity, but possessed no chart for liberation. The words came slowly. "Na południe, du partyzantów." South, to the partisans. Rumors had circulated through the camp. Resistance fighters in the southern forests, Jews and Poles who had escaped, fighting with salvaged weapons and desperate courage. Perhaps only legend, perhaps salvation. Estera's small hand found his, fingers intertwining. "Będziemy wolni. We will be free." Jacob looked at the sleeping children, at the forest stretching around them, at morning light filtering between trees. Freedom remained a distant shore, separated by hunger, winter, pursuit, and war. Yet for the first time in 3 years, possibility existed. He squeezed Estera's hand gently and discovered within himself the capacity for speech once more. Words emerged like water from stone, each one a small miracle of reclamation. Już jesteśmy. We already are. The forest absorbed his words, carrying them toward the lightning sky. Behind them, the camp continued its grim business. Ahead, war raged. But here, 6 children had rewritten the equations of their existence, beyond barbed wire and numbered tattoos. Jacob tilted his face toward the breaking day, feeling warmth touch his skin. His voice, newly rediscovered, held steady as he spoke again. Not to Astera, not to the sleeping children, but to the memory of his father that he carried within. I remember who I am, so today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.